Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about some books, which we often like to do here, but today we're specifically going to be talking about some spring and summer book recommendations, as well as my spring-summer TBR. So make sure to grab a drink, grab a snack, and let's go ahead and hop on in. Whenever we start entering into spring and the warmer weather, I'm really looking for some happy, fun, light reads, which generally leads me to romance. And a romance genre that I think does amazing in the warmer months is some small town romances. So I have a couple different small town romances to recommend to you guys. The first one being the When in Rome series by Sarah Adams. Specifically, I've already read the first book, which is When in Rome, and the sequel to that is Practice Makes Perfect. There is also a third book that came out recently called Beg, Borrow, or Steal, and we end up following different siblings within the series. Starting off with the brother Noah. His story begins whenever a famous pop star rolls into their small town and needs a place to stay for the week. He begrudgingly takes her in, and that is the start of their grumpy sunshine love story. After that, we follow his little sister Annie in Practice Makes Perfect. She's always been seen as the town's sweetheart, very innocent, does not have a lot of experience dating, and so she enters into agreement with our pop star's bodyguard Will for a little teaching arrangement. While he's giving her tutoring lessons, they start fake dating and their romance grows from there. Book 3 is a rivals to lovers story following another sister. They're currently teachers working at the same school within the small town, but their relationship stems back into college, where I think something went wrong. I do have that on my physical TBR, and hopefully I will be able to get to that one soon. I wouldn't say that this series is a 5-star series by any means, but they are super quick and easy to read. Not only does the small town that they're located in have a very quirky personality, but the residents of the small town add a lot of personality themselves, and they are pretty low on the spice, so if that's not something you're into, these would be great to pick up this time of year. Now, if you're in the mood for more spice, but still like a town with a lot of personality, I think you would like Love in Bloom by Lucy Eden. Our FMC is a city girl living in Atlanta. That is until her grandparents pass away and she ends up inheriting their farm in small town Georgia. However, whenever she gets to the farm, she's not the only one there. The farm's manager, Dan, also lives on the property, so we get a little forced proximity between these two as she's also adjusting to small town life. I would say if you want to pick this one up, there is a little surprise that happens midway through the book, and I think the back blurb actually gives it away, so I would not encourage you to read the full blurb if you want to have a little surprise in store for you. I've annotated a couple places within this book where there's just some really great banter between these two, and overall I think a very fun spring-summer read. If you like maybe the city girl, small town guy feel, but with a bit more emotional depth, you will probably like Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Our FMC gets stuck in this small town for the night after her car breaks down, and she ends up having a one-night stand with one of the town's residents. This is very much out of character for her, so she ends up fleeing the next morning, but she can't get this guy out of her mind. Very fun setup with this book, but there is a lot of emotional depth to it as well. Our FMC Alexis has this really toxic ex-boyfriend who she has to work with every day. Add on top of that her very toxic family members who are in love with her ex. You see why Alexis is so happy to leave her life and escape to this small town where she starts building her relationship with Daniel. This is also the start of one of Abby Jimenez's interconnected standalone series. I would say that this is her more popular series. The books that follow are Yours Truly, Just for the Summer, and the book that just came out, Say You'll Remember Me. I don't think this is my absolute favorite book by Abby Jimenez, but it is probably my second favorite. And if you haven't picked it up, I would really encourage you to do so. Next is probably my favorite book of 2025 so far, and that is The X-Files by Jessica Joyce, which you can probably tell it's my favorite by how many tabs I have within this book. I loved every single second of this. This was easily a 6-star read for me. This is a second chance romance where these two exes are forced together to help with their best friend's wedding. So after not seeing each other for 5 years, these two venture to Napa Valley together for 2 weeks in an attempt to replan and save their friend's wedding. And I really think the wedding aspect and the venue for this is what makes this feel like such a great spring-summer read. Also, the writing in this book was just absolutely phenomenal. Lyrical, but not to the point of unnecessary, but there's just so many beautiful quotes within this book. It is a dual timeline where we do see their relationship somewhat falling apart in the past and how they're rebuilding it in the present. I don't even have the vocabulary to really put into words why this book was so phenomenal, but please just pick it up for yourself and I promise you won't regret it. Also, going off of those wedding vibes, I would encourage you to pick up Forget Me Not by by Julie Soto. This book just found me at the absolute perfect time because we follow a wedding planner and a wedding florist, also in a second chance romance where they're forced to work together on this influencer's wedding. I was in the depths of planning my wedding whenever I read this, so it was just really fun being in our FMC's point of view as she's planning this huge wedding and dealing with all of the natural issues and complications that go along with it. There is a huge emphasis of this book on flowers, which also give it that spring vibe, because our MMC Elliot not only is a wedding florist, but he's like a florist structural architect essentially. He creates these huge pieces using really rare exotic flowers. I will also say that if you love a really brooding man, you will absolutely love Elliot. This is the second book I've read by Julie Soto and I've really liked her writing, but I will say this is the best one to read this time of year. I don't really think there's a season to read this book other than in the spring summer, and that would be Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. I really connected to this book and gave it a 5 stars, but I also think I would have connected to this even more if I was a little bit older and also a mom. Our FMC Allie is in her mid to late 30s within this book, and we're following her after the loss of her mom and getting a divorce. Through those two events, she's really lost herself. While at the dog park one day, her dog ends up peeing on a random stranger, and these two end up connecting and building a little summer romance. Even though the cover, the title, and the premise of this book sound pretty light and airy, I would say this still packs an emotional punch. Ethan is such a perfect partner for Allie because he's so supportive of her. He really encourages her on the journey of refinding herself and finding her voice. Annabelle Monaghan's writing style is so unique. Her sentences and her sentence structure are so simply written, and it doesn't even feel like she's trying at all, but she's still able to pack such a deep meaning into her words. I was really impressed with this one. This is the first book I've read by her, but I only want to read more. I don't think we can talk about spring summer reads without the queen of beach reads herself, and that is Miss Ellen Hildebrand. She has the most insane backlog. I think she's written 30 plus books, but I have read 2 and I found them both so enjoyable. I would say the Hotel Nantucket is my favorite, but I did also really enjoy Barefoot. If you're a fan of Bravo, you will absolutely be a fan of Miss Ellen Hildebrand. She also has a very unique writing style because it's in the third person and you do end up following so many characters. And you even get non-human POVs. So in the Hotel Nantucket, you get a ghost point of view as well as just the island of Nantucket itself. Sorry if my camera angle just changed slightly, my camera battery just died. So as I was saying, that writing style might sound a little bit intimidating because it can take a little bit to get used to following so many people, but I promise you it is worth it because these books are just so juicy and fun. Personally for me, I like to stick more to her women's fiction type of reads rather than her murder mysteries. But for a quick overview, the Hotel Nantucket follows a whole bunch of different people involved in the rebuilding and rebranding of the Hotel Nantucket. It's changed ownerships many times over the past 80 to 100 years, but a really rich billionaire based in London ends up buying the property and completely redoes it. So we end up following a lot of the staff members within the hotel, but we also follow some of the guests and then some of the people that these staff members are connected to. Honestly, just so fun and entertaining. I gave this a 4.5 stars whenever I read it, but honestly, I think on a reread, I might end up giving it a 5 stars. I only have positive memories whenever I think back to this book. So after reading that, I ended up picking up Barefoot. And this book I still very much enjoyed, but I did end up giving this about a 3.5 stars. We follow 3 women as they arrive in Nantucket for the summer, and each of them are kind of running away from their own problems. They're each going through their own sort of midlife crisis, and we also see how this 22-year-old Josh from Nantucket becomes involved in all of their lives. Again, just absolutely so much drama. There is no shortage of entertainment within this one. I will just say that their lives are in such a state of disarray throughout this book that sometimes it did make me feel a little bit bad for them, and is what I think caused a little bit of a lower rating. But even with that being said, this book is overall just so entertaining and makes you want to keep reading, even just to see what craziness happens next. The next book is also better classified as women's fiction, and that is Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. If you end up wanting to read this book, please listen to it as an audiobook. It's narrated by Meryl Streep, and I've never heard of a more perfect narrator for a book because we end up getting the point of view of a mom who is reliving the tales of her youth to her 3 daughters. Whenever she was younger, she was kind of an up-and-coming actress in Hollywood and ended up being in a play and building a relationship with now a very famous actor. So again, with this one, we get these moments of past and present, reliving the memories, but also building new memories with her daughters. I don't know what it was about this one, but it just felt so real. Like I mentioned, there is not a more perfect narrator for this other than Meryl Streep. It is just so believable watching this past timeline of how she got introduced to Hollywood and this romance began, and also how it ended. I honestly think anyone of any age could read this book because there's a lot you can relate to from the daughters' perspectives who are in their 20s, and also a lot you can learn from and relate to from the mom's perspective. Such a beautiful book, and I would highly recommend. Now, there's no way I can talk about spring summer reads without mentioning Emily Henry, the queen herself, but I wanted to save it for last because obviously a lot of people have already read Emily Henry. If for some reason you're one of the very few on earth who hasn't, this time of year is the perfect time to pick up one of her books. Out of the 5 books I have here, if I had to give you my top 2 recommendations for spring summer, I'm gonna be so basic and obviously start off by saying Happy Place. This is a second chance romance where we follow these 2 exes who are forced together for their friend's yearly getaway trip, and the beach house and the location of this book is the epitome of summer. Not only is the relationship in this story so amazing, but I also love the commentary on adult friendships and how those shift as you get older and enter into new phases of life. This is an absolute god tier book for me, one of my favorite books of last year, and funnily enough, it reminds me a lot of The X-Files, which is probably going to be my favorite book of this year. Next best summer read for me would be Book Lovers. That's because we follow 2 sisters who escape the city for a little summer trip. They go to the small town of Sunshine Falls, which is the inspiration used in one of their favorite book series. They also have a little summer bucket list to do whilst they're there, and that causes our FMC Nora to reconnect with one of her work rivals, Charlie, as he is also in this small town for the summer. One of my favorite parts about this romance is that they're both in the book industry, so it's always just fun getting a glimpse into 2 bookish people. Add on that this town and atmosphere is just so idyllic. This is truly the perfect summer read. So with those recommendations out of the way, I am going to talk about 10 books that I specifically want to get to this spring summer. Starting off with the books that I already have on my physical TBR, I'd love to get to Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. If you remember, this is actually part of this same series as Part of Your World. This is book 3 within that series, and I have only heard amazing things. Both of our main characters feel like they're cursed because every time they date someone, whenever they break up, that person goes on to find the love of their life. These 2 realize they end up sharing the same curse through a Reddit thread, so they come up with a plan that if they date each other, their curses will cancel out and they'll go on to find their soulmate. This book came out last summer and just absolutely blew up. It is now on Kindle Unlimited, so I plan on reading this on my honeymoon, and I hope that it doesn't end up completely breaking me because Abby Jimenez is known for writing quite emotional romances. The next book I just recently started, and I can also tell you that this is going to be quite an emotional romance. That is Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young. This is the sequel to Out on a Limb, which I read earlier this year and gave a 5 stars. We end up following a couple that we're introduced to in book 1, Sarah and Caleb. They're high school sweethearts and they've been together for 17 years. However, our FMC Sarah has really lost herself over these past few years and doesn't feel like she has much to be proud of. That causes her to question a lot within herself and her relationship, and we end up following a marriage in distress storyline as these 2 make the spontaneous decision to get out of their comfort zone and join a grueling hiking trip intended to guide couples through rough patches. Next, I have another Ellen Hildebrand book on my shelves called 28 Summers. I did get this late last summer and I kind of have been waiting to pick this up. I honestly don't know much about this other than we follow a romance over 28 summers. I'm really not sure what to expect because again, I wouldn't really qualify her books as romances. They're more women's fiction. So I'm not totally sure this book has a happy ending, but I do think it's perfect to pick up this time of year. From another author that I recommended earlier, I have You with a View by Jessica Joyce. This is her debut romance and something that I'm super excited to read. We follow 2 former high school enemies who must reunite for a road trip inspired by their grandparents' broken engagement. I'm not certain this takes place in the summertime, but I just felt like a road trip definitely gives summer vibes. I'm also just excited to read more by this author, so I think it'll be fun to get to this sooner rather than later. Next is another book that I'm not certain takes place in the summertime, but the cover really screams summer to me. That is The Co-op by Tara DeWitt. I recently read Savor It by this author, which I wasn't totally obsessed with, but it was a very summery and somewhat spicy romance, so I thought maybe the same with this one. Our 2 main characters had a short summer fling whenever they were teens. However, a decade later, their grandmothers have left them with shared ownership of this building that needs to be completely renovated. Our FMC has the money, but in order to access her trust, she must be married married. Our MMC has the construction experience but lacks the funds, so these two end up entering into a marriage of convenience as they fix up this property and plan on cutting ties afterwards. Continuing on with authors that I recommended earlier, I want to read 2 books by Annabelle Monaghan. One is from her backlist called Nora Goes Off Script. This also ends up following a woman post-divorce. I think she ends up writing a screenplay of either her life or her marriage that just ended, and they want to film the movie at her house. And I think the actor who ends up playing her ex-husband, she builds a relationship with. There are a few similar points between that and summer romance, so I have a lot of high hopes going into that one. I also want to read her newest release, which is coming out in May, called It's a Love Story. I'm reading through the premise of this on Goodreads, and I will say I am a little bit confused, but I'm just going to trust that Annabelle Monaghan knows what she's doing. Next on my TBR is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I will just say the cover of this book is so stunning, completely gives spring vibes, and one of the few things I know about this book is that it's an accidental pregnancy story. I wouldn't have ever thought that that's a storyline that I prefer, but so many booktubers that I follow have rated this so highly. And after reading Out on a Limb earlier this year and loving it, I think this is one that I could really enjoy as well. I haven't read anything by this author so far, but from what I've heard, she gives similar vibes to authors that I do enjoy, where we still get great writing, an amazing love story, as well as some very needed emotional depth to go along with it. Second to last on my TBR is something that I totally got influenced by. I didn't originally have this on my radar, but after hearing everyone's reviews, I am now so intrigued. That would be Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. This is in the Hunger Games universe, and we are now following Hamish's story. I had kind of fallen off the Hunger Games and these spin-offs that they've been doing because I didn't read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I tried to watch the movie and couldn't even get through it, which is why I didn't originally have this book on my radar, but I've only heard amazing reviews about this one. I did obviously love Hamish from the original series, so I am excited and incredibly nervous to learn more about his backstory. And finally, the least original book to add to my TBR, and that would be Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. If you couldn't tell by my recommendations earlier, I obviously am a fan, so I'm gonna stay up to date with her newest release. This is another book where we're following 2 main characters in the writing industry. I have heard this book compared to The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, because these 2 writers are competing to tell the story of tragic heiress, former tabloid princess, and daughter of one of the most storied and scandalous families of the 20th century. From what I've heard, this book very much leans on the women's fiction side with a small subplot of romance. Even though I am a romance girl at heart, I trust what Emily Henry is going to be able to do with this story, and I can't wait to pick it up. Alright guys, I have been talking for so long, I feel like I literally have no words left, but I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you found at least one book to pick up in this season ahead. If you have any books that you would recommend for the spring summertime, make sure to leave a comment down below. And for now, this is where I will love you and leave you, so thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye guys!